Good morning, and we're a little bit late. We had a couple of technical issues, but they're sorted out, and here we are. If you're a car guy, want to know more about your car, performance, and all things related to that, you're in the right spot. I'm Kenny Brown. This is Cars and Coffee. For the next hour, I'm going to answer some of your questions because I talk about what you guys want to know about, and we'll try to share some of my, really extensive background in performance cars and professional motorsports. Here with the artwork for the month is in reference to the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which is running in the fall, but nevertheless I thought we'd put the 1969 winning Ford GT up there of Oliver and Ickx. Interesting that in that race, the 908 Porsche and the Ford GT battled it out to the bitter end. On the last lap, there were multiple lead changes, and in the end, the Ford won. But that leads me to the lead. That's a good lead-in to Ernie's question on why Porsches handle so good. So today, going to my list, I used to have like 1 page, then we went to 2 and 3. Now we're up to 4 pages. So I need to start over because we got a little frazzled with our technical stuff. This morning, we're going to be talking about answer Ernie's questions on Mustangs and Porsches. We're going to talk about the importance of car prep, nitrogen versus air in tires, tire squeal. Is it good, is it bad, or is it ugly? And then why I decided to do the Transform Your Driving Experience, and that's actually starting Monday. It's going to be 5 evenings from 7:30 to about an hour each night. And essentially, I decided to do this because, as you know, I'm doing these Saturday morning Cars and Coffees because I'm answering a lot of questions that you want to know. That, you really can't get good information out there for the most part. There's a lot of information. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. So I want to just kind of, at least from my perspective, share my 40 plus years of doing this and building cars and in professional racing. So that's why I decided to do the Saturday morning Cars and Coffee. And then I thought, well, we've got all these different subjects I've talked about over, what 18 weeks now, something like that. So what Transforming Your Driving Experience does, it kind of like pulls a lot of that together, and I'm going to put it into a format and basically how I approach building a car. And it's transferable, whether it's a high-performance street car, one of my serialized track cars, street track car, or a championship-winning race car. The basic premise and the philosophy and all that are the same no matter what kind of car. So I'm going to share how I do it, and hopefully you can learn something from that, and we'll go through multiple different stages. We've got it broken down into, I got to flip my page for this. Okay, day 1 is going to be the first crucial step, which most people either don't think thoroughly through, skip, or just do part of, and that's the planning. You're planning. And then days 2 and 3, we're going to talk about the performance platform. And those who have been with me for a while know that the two big things I'm really big on is building your performance platform. That's chassis, suspension, wheels, tires, brakes, and tire temperatures. And we're going to address both of those in Transforming Your Driving Experience. And day 4, we'll talk about putting the whole package together and dialing the car in, whether it's for the street, for the track, what to do for alignment, the setup, if you're going on the street, how to adjust your shocks, on track, how to adjust your shocks. And then day 5 is getting into more deeper techniques on track tuning and setup and driving and things like that. Oh, I see a lot of thumbs and wrenches coming up in the air. We like that. Oh, that always helps. So that's kind of where we are with Transforming Driving Experience. Starts Monday night, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. I'm kind of working all week, figuring out what I want to talk about and how I want to talk about it. And it's going to be more work than I thought, but it's going to be okay. I think I've got my head around how I want to do this so I can share the most amount of information in the shortest amount of time with you guys. Getting into some of today's topics, and it also gets back to my lead-in. Ernie wanted to know, he went to a Porsche Club event. He was pretty disappointed how his Mustang performed against the Porsches at a Porsche Club. And he wanted to know why Porsches handle so darn well. I got lots of good reasons. I used to have a couple of Porsches. I I ran around with the Porsche Club guys in the late 90s, early 2000s. I put a lot of roundabout Porsches on my dyno. And here's the, the big difference. Porsche started building sports cars in around 1948. Ford started building Mustang pony cars in about 1965. They're two completely different cars. Porsche has been developing sports cars all those years, and aside from that, I mean, they're one of the premier marques in world racing. In fact, back here, we're talking about '69. The 908 Porsche was running, hammer and tong with the Ford GT. Porsche has a massive background in sports cars and especially racing. I mean, it's the #1 brand, professional racing all over the world. The other thing is, when you go to a Porsche Club event, and this is kind of important too, when you go to a Porsche Club event, the Porsches that you'll see at a Porsche Club event are not the Porsches that you will see at like a normal track day. The reason being is the Porsche Club guys are really serious. Their cars are well prepared, well sorted, they're good drivers, and a lot of them are running for points. So I mean, that's like the Porsche guys that show up at a regular track day are there to drive. The Porsche Club guys that show up for a Porsche Club event are very serious. So, I mean, can a Mustang beat Porsche? In certain circumstances, yes. But I mean, there's a lot of variables. I'll give you two situations I have personal experience with. Is some of you have seen the video of me at Road America in my 2012 GT4 Mustang that's naturally aspirated, just a Boss motor with headers and exhaust. But it's got full suspension and full brake package and some aero. And it starts out with me having to lift going to turn 14 to keep from running into a Viper. And then as soon as I get around the corner and get my foot into it, I carry so much more mid-corner and corner exit speed, I jump the Viper and I can't hold them off all the way down the straightaway. Well, that's the first part. But then the next, coming into turn 5, I come from way back and I just seriously outbrake a Porsche GT3 RS. And then coming around, and I keep up with him to the carousel, and coming out of the carousel, I had such a full head of steam that he had to let me by. Okay, that was an older GT3 RS. If that was a brand new 2019 GT3 RS, I would have been able to brake with him. I wouldn't have had any advantage in braking, would have been braking about the same, but he would have had a lot more grip and a lot more power. I would not have been able to pass him. So there's a that's kind of how that works. A real good thing is back in 86, 87 when we did the Sebring cars in the Escort Endurance Series, we were running the GT class against Porsches. And in 86, Porsches, pretty much ruled. We did come away with the victory at the 24 Hours of Canada with our backup car because the first car crashed, and that's primarily because there was a lot of attrition with the Porsches. Now, 87, we had a real race on our hands with one of the Porsches, and we ended up getting first, third, and fourth. If the race had gone another half hour, we would have got first, second, and fourth. But the reason we did that when I first started doing the Sebring cars and endurance racing, this is all new to me, so I had to learn. So what I did in 86, our first year, I paid attention to the very best teams. I paid close attention to what they did and how they did it. If you want to learn something, you kind of look at the best and you follow their lead. And what I just kind of found out through 86 is the Mustangs were just tough. They're American cars, they're rugged. And, the Porsches, you look at the size of the bolts on a Mustang, look at the size of the bolts of Porsche, like a big difference. So in 87, what we did is, in a lot of endurance racing, back in the early days, is people would sort of race 70% through most of the race, and the last quarter of the race they'll start stepping it up, and the last couple hours they're really racing hard. Well, what we did is we just knew the Mustangs were tough. We just ran them absolutely as hard as they would go. And it's just like, okay, we're doing this. You guys got to keep up. And we won a lot because of attrition, because we just had tougher cars. We just ran them as hard as we could, from the green flag to the checkered flag. No soft pedaling, no taking it easy, just flat out hard running. And we were able to beat a pretty good Porsche there. And then Sebring, there was a whole bunch of Porsches that showed up for Sebring, because that was the last race. And the team championship, we'd already won the driver championship, the manufacturers, and the tire championship. And the team championship was the only one left to win. And Porsche was also bidding for the team championship, so they brought a whole bunch of extra Porsches in for Sebring, and it didn't matter. I mean, we just did the same thing. We ran 11 daylights out of the car. Although we did have a little bit of an incident, we blew the rear end out that mid-race and changed the whole rear axle on the lead car in pit lane in the rain, and that car only had to finish, didn't have to win the race, it just had to finish ahead of a few cars, and we actually won because of won the team championship because the lead Corvette crossed the start-finish line something like 10 or 15 seconds before the 12 hours, which meant he had to do another lap, and with that lap we were able to pass the Pinelli Jones George Fulmer car, which we had stopped in pit lane so that they wouldn't get any more laps, and that one extra lap we won the team championship. So can you beat Porsches? Yes. Is it easy? No. Porsche is a grand mark. They make fabulous cars. It's one of the few cars you can go to the dealership, write $150,000, $170,000 check and go straight to the track and be competitive. So anyway, there's kind of like Porsche versus Mustang. Although my Mustangs work pretty good, as a lot of you know. And then John was asking about, he lives around 4,000 feet above sea level, and his question is, his ideal tire pressure is 33. And what changes when running air and nitrogen at different elevations, and what's the cause and effect of maintaining 33 psi, ideally running air and nitrogen? Good question, a very good question. If at all possible, always run nitrogen in your tires. And there's a very good reason for that. Nitrogen is a dry, inert gas. I mean, we use nitrogen in the pits in our air tools, and we put it in our tires. Nitrogen is dry, which means there's no moisture, which means when you're doing pressures on tires, the pressures you get are the pressures you get. There's no change. If you're using outside air, depending on, it'll impact the pressure based on how much humidity there was when you fill the tires up, because moisture in air changes the expansion rate. So that'll work at different rates. So it's always, it'll be more stable with nitrogen. And I think like Costco and a lot of tire stores now have nitrogen, so it's not as hard to find as it used to be. And I'll give you a really good example of what the difference is. This is in, I'm guessing 2010 maybe, at Lime Rock Mustang Challenge. We're running 3 cars there, and I was having a really hard time getting the pressures worked out. I mean, this was not usual. I mean, it's a really difficult time getting the pressures worked out. I mean, they just were fluctuating so much. We weren't coming up with solid numbers every time. So when it came race time, I just had to make the best guess I had. And the cars were really quick for about the first 3 laps, maybe 4 laps. And then they started to come off, and by about 5 or 6 laps, they were off quite a bit. And the reason we found at the end is the tire pressures were, wacky. A little investigation. What I found out is that our truckie, who was also supposed to be in charge of tires, rather than, when he got the tires, brought back the tires from BFG, rather than bleeding all the air out and filling them up with nitrogen, he would only top them up with nitrogen. So it had mostly regular air in the car, and it was incredibly humid that weekend. So the extra humidity in the air just completely screwed up my tire pressures, and needless to say, that was the last event for that truckie. I mean, because that's pretty unacceptable. You have to have good data, and you have to have repeatable data, and your tire pressures need to be repeatable and stable. So that's why nitrogen is so good. As far as 4,000 feet, to me, 33 pounds at 4,000 feet is 33 pounds at sea level. Although if you take a car that's got pressure and 43 or 4,000 feet and bring that sea level, the pressure is going to change dramatically, and vice versa. So at whatever elevation you're at, tire pressure is, altitude is irrelevant. And you just have to use your tire parameter and your air gauge, and just make sure the tires are where they want to be. Remember, tire parameters, we talked about that, and we'll talk about that more in the, you want to stick the tires. If you only have a infrared, that's okay. I mean, it's really not super accurate, but any data is better than no data. Okay, so if that's all you have, that's what you can work with. Otherwise, what you really want to do, because the surface cools off really, really fast. You want these little stickers. You want to get it down inside the rubber. You want to know what temperature is the rubber temperature is, and then of course you get your pressure gauge, and then you adjust your pressure, and we'll talk about that more on, I think that's day 4 maybe, on transforming your driving experience. So it's kind of a little bit on...
I have a question for you. Ernie is asking, where can you get nitrogen anymore?
I know Costco has nitrogen, and if you call around some of the tire stores, like Tire Barn or some of those, I know some of them do carry nitrogen. So it's just a matter, get on the phone and call around. If you got a Costco membership, they've got nitrogen. And like I say, I've seen, you can tell if nitrogen's in a tire because it's the little cap that goes on the valve stem is green. You see a tire with a green valve stem on it, it's got nitrogen, and you ask that guy, hey, where'd you get the nitrogen for your tires? Or just call around the different tire stores, and somebody's going to have it. It's getting pretty prevalent now. And if you're just joining us, I'm Kenny Brown. This is Cars and Coffee, where I share my 40-plus years of experience building high-performance cars, street cars, track cars, and championship-winning race cars. I'm here today with our artwork for the month of June, which is the 69 Le Mans. And I've got quite a few pieces of work this is by Nicholas Watts. I've got quite a few pieces of work by him. He does excellent work. And of course, trusty toolbox. Been with me for over 40 years and been to, I think, every major racetrack in North America. And somebody said one time, boy, if that toolbox could talk. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
So we have another question on air. Jim Flattery, if you have air in the tires and want to go to nitrogen, how do you purge the air out? Do you just deflate and put in nitrogen? Or?
Yeah, just pretty much let all the air out. Kind of maybe push on it and then put nitrogen in. The air that's left in the tire is going to be minimal, and it would be best to even do it on a drier day, low humidity day. But yeah, just let all the air out and put nitrogen in, and you're going to be good. Like I say, that's all we ever did, and the amount of air that's left in there is pretty much negligible as far as impact on pressure. Carry with our signs. Oh yeah, who signed up for the workshop? Put your comments below if you're signed up. If you're not signed up, we can get you signed up by
putting a link in the
comments. So I mean, it's going to be pretty good. We've got a number of people, and it's growing. And like I say, I'm looking forward to it. This is the first time I've actually kind of tried to put what I do into a kind of like an abbreviated context, but sort of in order so people can understand.
And it's on Monday already.
And it starts, it's Monday already, Tuesday evening, 7:30 Eastern. On Friday, we'll get your comments. If people have things to do Friday night, we might put it earlier, but I need your feedback to know if you'd like to be a little earlier on Friday evening. Oh man, more thumbs up are coming. Where's wrenches? Where's the wrenches? Little heart-shaped wrenches.
I want to add one more comment since you're talking workshop. If you already signed up, register for the workshop, but you haven't signed up for a Speed Therapy Society, you need to join that group because that's where the workshop's going to be held. So it's a private event. So
that's a good point.
We'll put a link in the comments.
It is a private event within our private group. Now, for those who don't do Facebook, email Carrie at info@kattybrown.com, and she's working on a way to have you participate without having to be in Facebook. And we continue to try to work on that for people. Once again, we were going to try to do a simulcasting today, but we had some technology issues at the last minute, surprise. And then we had technology issues with Facebook and our phones. So we are working on it. Hopefully by next week we'll be simulcasting live on YouTube. That's our commitment to you non-Facebook guys.
Just real quick, Wendy just commented. She said she's checking in from the track, and the car is totally a new beast.
Now, Wendy is said her car is a totally new beast. Now, Wendy has been working on her car all week, getting it ready. I think she got the rear roll center kit and then the front grip kit. And we've been on the phone multiple times helping her work through some small issues, but it sounds like it's going well. And that's the whole thing. I mean, my suspension for S197 Mustangs, I mean, it's nobody else in the market does what I do. And what I do is I focus on the geometry. It's all about the geometry and focusing on how a Mustang works, mitigating the weaknesses and magnifying the strengths. So we'll talk about more of that in the workshop too. But yeah, like I say, I mean, I've been doing this for so long. I've won national championships in professional racing, and yeah, I'm sharing all this stuff with you. I mean, you don't have to do what I do. It's been 40 years to learn this. I'm trying to share as much as I can, and I don't mind doing it. I know that I'm probably one of the most copied people in the Mustang market. At some time, I'll do just an episode where we'll go through all the different components that I brought to market first that everybody's copied, and the list is pretty darn long. And I'm sure that my competitors are watching, because all of a sudden I'm seeing a lot of things happen that I've been doing for years. I've seen other companies bringing their panel bars down to the bottom differential, lower the roll center. I'm seeing people talk about spring rates that they never do. So yeah, I don't care. They might know what I do, but they don't know how I do it. So I like that. Okay, where was I? We're talking about tire pressures, and let's see. I'm down to squeal, tire squeal. Ernie wants to know about tire squeal in the corners as an ambient temperature, tire pressure, lower, high, speed, alignment, all the above, basically. Tire squeal is mostly on street tires, and I said there's good squeal and bad squeal. There's no squeal is a bad word for when a tire is pressure's right, alignment's right, and everything. And it's like a street tire. When it's on the very edge, it'll give you a little sing. When it starts to squawk or squeal, that's no good. It's telling you, I ain't liking this. You got to change things. So tire squeal is mostly on street tires. The better the tire, the less the squeal. And there's some really good street tires you can drive on the track. I mean, I think the one that I think that we use the most is the Michelin, even though we're Pirelli people, is the Michelin Pilot S4 or 4S. That's a really good tire for both street and track. And of course, we move into our track tires like the Pirelli Corsas, which are amazing. So, I mean, tire squeal it's nothing you really want to hear, but if it's just a singing, okay, this tire's on the edge, let me know, hey, I'm okay, but you better pay attention. And if it starts squealing and squawking, it's like, hey, stop it, knock it off. I don't like it. And if you don't, I'm gonna screw you up. So that's my little pitch on tires. Let's see, Mark. Now this is good. Mark, we were talking back and forth with the guys on the group about his pole issue, and he went through and started checking things and found a loose bolt on one of the brackets, which is, that's why I stress nut and bolt checks. And he made a comment that this will be on his nut and bolt list from now on, and that's a good thing. And a few weeks back, we put this kind of like checklist, and I think it's posted in the society.
Yeah, in the units.
In the units, and this is in the society group, in the units part, this is posted. It's a checklist I've been using for 20 years maybe. It was originally designed for open wheel cars and prototype sports cars, but it's you can use it for anything. But what it does is it kind of trains your mind to think, okay, I need to go through the car and check stuff. And when we're racing, I have what we call a major nut and bolt and then a light nut and bolt. Major nut and bolts happen before each race, and that's like completely through the car. Check all the nuts and bolts, everything, make sure everything's good, clean everything off, make it look like brand new. And minor nut and bolt happens at the track between Saturday and Sunday, or Friday and Saturday, or Saturday and Sunday. Anyway, it happens in the evening after each day. And that's, if you do nut and bolt checks for a while, you're going to notice there's maybe a couple of bolts here and there that want to have a tendency to loosen up. And those are the ones we do in light nut and bolt check. We'll just double check those and make sure they're okay. Because here's the thing, when you drive cars hard, things will loosen up. I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, we use like lock nuts and do good torque values, but stuff happens. Anything that's mechanical can surprise you at times. So we always recommend a major nut and bolt check before you go to a track. If you keep finding the same bolt that comes loose over and over, you might either change the bolt and the nylock, or it's something that you want every time you do a nut and bolt check. Be sure to check that particular bolt. So that kind of brings up the value of nut and bolt checks. What are we up to now? Oh, this is another good one. Herstifer, who's over in Bulgaria, he said he's going to be watching the workshop at 2:30 a.m. Drink lots of coffee. That's dedication. Save your Saturday cars and coffee cup for the workshop. But his question is, he's got a 550, and he wants to run a square tire setup. And he says that his options are for wheels 19, 9.5, 1910, 1911, and he knows that the GT350s run a 305 on 1911 on the front, but the Racing School Fords run a 285/35 on 9.5-inch wheel. So which is better? Okay, let's look at this scientifically. All right, let's look at the data. You know, I'm big on data. So if we look at two basic things, the tire, the diameter, and the wheel, the recommended wheels, a 285/35 is a 26.9-inch tall tire, and the recommended wheel is 10-inch. A 295/30 is a 26-inch tall tire, and the recommended wheel is 11. A 295/35, which they're not real common, but there are some, it's a 27.1-inch tall tire, and that takes a 10.5-inch wheel. And a 305/30 is a 26.3 tall tire, and that takes 11-inch wheel. Based on this, what my decision would be is I'd want to run the 285/35 because it's a tall tire. It's almost 27 inches tall. And Mustangs, because of the weight, tall tires are better. They also help acceleration. Think about this, you know, a taller tire helps forward bite in a Mustang. Think about dragsters. They got these like giant tall tires, and they use the tall tires to get bite. It isn't quite the same, but I think you get the idea. And because the 285/35 is 26.9 inches tall, it's about 27-inch tall tire, and on a 10-inch wheel. So you know, 10-inch in all four corners, 285/35s all the way around. You can rotate them. You know, you got a square setup, and then you know, I can actually adjust the balance of the car for this setup by choosing with springs. If you got coilovers, you know, I can choose the springs that, you know, would balance that out. So that was my recommendation. Now on Kermie, people remember good old Kermie, my 2001 Cobra. That man, they talk about a fun, fast car to drive. That had our AGS 3.5 suspension on it, and I was able to start out as a supercharged V6 because Ford wanted to highlight V6s for the 2000 SEMA show. So we started out with supercharged V6, but then we switched over. I had access, was working Ford Racing at the time. I got one of the 4.6 FR500 motors prototypes, and we put that in there, and man, that car was fast. It was easy to drive. Anyway, what I'm getting to is what I ran on that was the Cobra R wheels, which were 18, 9.5. There weren't many 19-inch wheels back then. 18, 9.5, and I ran a 285/35. And it works perfect. I mean, a great package. So a 285/35 on a 10-inch wheel is going to be a great package. It's a good enough tire. You know, on the GT350s with, you know, that 305 on 11 front, I think they run a wider front fender. Some of you guys out there might know that for sure, but my understanding is they run a wider front fender. And I'm just, you know, I'm always queasy about putting an 11-inch wheel and 305 on the front of a Mustang. We did on a Ruby, or on Maryland, but what we did is we got...
That was a 550.
That was a 550. We did on Maryland, which is a 550, but we got the GT350 fenders, which are like an inch wide or something like that, and work great. We got 305s in the front and 315s in the back. So that's kind of my recommendation, and for anybody else too. You know, the 10-inch, you don't run on a square, 10-inch wheel, 285/35 is a great package. You can always, bigger tires are always better. Well, most of the time better. You get too big, it actually slows you down. But I mean, that's a good package, and it gives you the ability to rotate. And for those people who do want to rotate their tires, here's how I rotate them. If I rotate a tire, and you may have to, depending if it's a directional tire, you may have to dismount and mount. But I will swap, when I rotate, the left front and the right rear, because the left front does the most work and the right rear does the least amount of work. Then I'll swap the right front and the left rear. Again, the left rear is doing a lot of work and the right front's doing less work. So that way I'm getting, you know, kind of like the best tires in the best spots. So remember that if you're swapping left front, right rear, left rear, right front. Yeah, kind of cross them. And like I say, look, if your tires are directional, you're going to have to dismount them and remount them. And if it's directional, either have an arrow on the side, or they'll say this side out or this side in. So just be aware of that. So that's kind of like my tire thing. Well, we're kind of moving right along there, making good progress. Wow, that's almost, well, I had one subject, I had a subject we were going to talk about that I'm not talking about. That was our StreamYard, had to do with our live streaming to
Hopefully next week.
Facebook. But I've been promised next week. So that's like a whole page of stuff to talk about. So I got time for questions.
We have a couple comments on nut and bolts.
Okay.
First of all, let's see. Paul Sheldrake, he asked, do you ever use registration marks on your nut and bolts for quick checks?
That's a good question. Registration marks on nuts and bolts for quick checks. Not so much on race cars. However, when we're building performance cars or building a car for the first time, different techs will have a different color. And once that nut or bolt is torqued, they'll put their color on it. So it's very easy to go through the car and see if a nut's been torqued, and if it did, who did it. But typically on the track cars and race cars, I really don't do that. You know, we just do a nut and bolt check and make sure things are tight.
Fine if they
if you want to do it, it's fine. I don't see any problem with it.
Okay, so Christopher Sauer is talking from his experience with the aircraft industry. He says, as far as the nut and bolt checks, safety wiring as much factory hardware as you can is beneficial. This takes machining of the hardware. However, if done correctly, once wired hardware is very hard pressed to be removed by harmonics. This is the reason why every single bolt and tubing connection on aircraft is safety wired by requirement.
Okay, that's a good point. Safety wire. On our track cars and street cars, we typically don't safety wire. I mean, we're using grade 8 hardware and lock nuts. Now, race cars, that's a different story. Race cars will use a ton of safety wire because that's a whole different animal operating at a whole different level. It's like just short of an airplane. So yeah, we use a ton of safety wire on race cars. Not so much on street cars. And you know, if we do safety wire on a car and turn it over to a customer, and they need to change something, you know, you've got to have the tools. You've got to have the right nuts and bolts, and you know, you got to know how to do it. So rather than that, we use like grade 8 lock nut, so that with a good torque, and that pretty much everything stays in place.
Yeah. Do you have your safety wire pliers handy? This says show that. Brad's asking to see that.
Safety wire. Okay, you got to be in here somewhere.
I thought it was missing at one point.
Yeah. And I got 2 sets. And 1 set is never enough. Yes, I have safety plier wires. Now I'll just take a quick minute to kind of show something here. One works. I'm checking one works better than the other. There we go. Okay. I'm gonna take a piece of safety wire. And what can I safety wire? I know, I'll safety wire my coffee cup. Yeah, that's not too bad. I'm going to spill my coffee cup. I'll do this bottle of water because the lid's on. Safety wire, what you typically do.
You can't see
I'm
yourself.
going to tip you down. Can you see me? No, not yet. There we go. Safety wire, typically you're going to have a little tiny hole through bolts and nuts, and the safety wire is going to go through, and there's a whole different process to which way that you do them. So I'm just going to give you a quick example of how it works. Come on. There. I haven't used this in a long time. It's really stiff. Come on. Good thing I didn't use my coffee cup. Let's see if these will be any easier. I've not used stuff for a while. Come on. There we go. What happens is you pull. This is the one that doesn't work so well. Anyway, you pull on this little gizmo here.
I think this is something we should have set up, and it would have looked easy as pie next weekend.
Well, this is the one that doesn't work good, but it's the only one I can get the clip. Let me see if I can get this other one to.
Well, we can do it next week too.
Well, this far into it. Well, this is pretty frustrating.
I think this is a good example of why shows are not live. The car shows are not live.
Anyway, what happens is as you pull this is the pliers twist, and then they put a really nice little twist in the safety wire. I'll try to have something, do a better demonstration next week. So yeah, I do have safety wire, and I got 2 safety wire pliers. Both of them are old and tired, if that tells you anything. Okay, what else were we talking about?
Okay, let's see if we have any questions here. Okay, I don't see any questions. We'll give you another minute while Kenny talks about the Transform Your Driving Experience workshop that's going to start Monday at 7:30 in the evening live on Facebook in the Speed Therapy Society.
Speed Therapy Society. Yeah, you know, it's something I might. Well, I think we'll do this next week. I don't know if I'll talk about it I won't do the Transform Your Driving Experience, because this is going to be more based on street cars and truck cars. That has more something to do more of a race car section. But I'll have something set up next week so we can kind of show you how to do a safety wire. But in Transform, like I say, it's gonna. I'm gonna tell you how I approach a car. I know what I'm gonna do at the end. Know what I'm going to do at the beginning, and it's how I put everything together in between. And I'm going to give you a whole lot of things to talk about, a whole lot of things to think about as you're improving the performance of your car or building a car from scratch. I mean, and what we're going to talk about is not specific to Mustangs, although we know this is a big Mustang crowd. It's not specific to Mustang, but it's going to be the principles you can apply to any car. I mean, they're all the same. Cars are a car. You know, they got 4 wheels, a chassis, an engine, transmission, rear end. So, I mean, what I do to one car, that's why, I mean, I've been doing this for so long. I mean, most of my background in the 70s was European sports cars and Formula open wheel cars. And the principles are exactly the same. All the way up to when I did the Saline race cars, I brought my principles from that into that arena, even though it was something I really didn't know anything about. Is you know, endurance racing, sedans. You know, it's kind of like we were a little bit of snobs back then. You know, always said that, you know, real race cars don't have doors. Well, it took me a couple of events to figure out, well, that wasn't quite right, and I better figure this stuff out because these guys are good. So,
we have a few more questions.
Oh, questions are coming in.
Okay.
I was doing pretty good stalling for time, though.
Okay. Larry Ewers, have you ever used Evans Coolant?
That's a good question. Have I ever used Evans Coolant? And the answer is no. However, when I had my shop on Gasoline Alley, we dynoed, did a lot of dyno work for the Indy Lights cars back then. In fact, we were responsible for them changing the whole engine program, because we had a couple of guys that said, you know, that they thought their motors weren't as good as somebody else. So we started dynoing the Indy Lights motors. And sure enough, I mean, there was big power differences, and because of that, these guys take their dyno sheets and say, hey, you screwed me. And by the end of the run of I think those are Buick V6s, by the time they finished up with the Buick V6s, most of them were pretty close in power. So we had a pretty big input on that. Anyway, what I'm getting to is these guys are always looking for the smallest edge. Racing, you're not looking for, for seconds or even tenths of seconds. A lot of times you're looking for hundredths of a second to gain an advantage. And people would come in, these guys with their super whammy spark plugs, supposed to do all these great things. I think maybe 3 different guys come in with these trick spark plugs. Any improvement in power was pretty much minimal. And then we did actually test the Evans coolant on the dyno, and the car actually lost power. And my belief is that the Evans coolant is thick. I mean, it's not as thin as water. And when you've got something extra viscous, it takes more to pump that around with a water pump. And it's just like in oil in race cars. You go up in viscosity and you start losing power. In fact, I just talked to somebody just this past week. He was running 1030. He's got a lot of miles on his car, 1033 valve, and he wanted to know about running higher viscosity oil. And I said, as long as you got good oil pressure, stick with that. I mean, typically we use our 520. He was running 530. And I said, you put the more viscous the oil, the higher weight oil, you're going to lose power. And he said that he actually noticed that. He put some like 40, 50 in, thinking it was going to be better, and the car wasn't as fast. So a lot of race teams that have like dry sump systems, remember we talked about dry sump last week, and can maintain really solid oil pressure will run 0-weight oil. I mean, as long as you're getting lubrication and keeping pressure, you're going to pick up power with no viscosity. Others will run 0.5 weight. So the Evans cools really good. I think it's really good for street cars, but it proved to cost horsepower in an Indy Lights car. For on track, another good subject. What do you run on track? I've had people ask what percentage of coolant and water do you run on track? It's like water, pure water. Nothing else except water wetter. And we talked about that a couple weeks ago too. Because the reason is most in racing, absolutely cannot use coolant. In a lot of track, people don't like coolant because if you do happen to spring a leak, blow a hose, and you get the antifreeze all over the track, that is worse than oil. And it takes them a long time to get it cleaned up. It takes a lot of work and a long time to clean it up. Where if you blow a hose, it's water, sweep and sun, and it's gone. So, and actually just straight water with the water wetters, and I had somebody explain what it does to make the water actually conduct heat better. I mean, that's your absolute best coolant for the track. Summertime. Don't forget to change it back to coolant in the wintertime, though.
Okay, so Paul Sheldrake says, it has been stated that grade 8 bolts are used on suspension components. I've used grade 5 and found them to bend prior to braking. 8s have sheared. Any experience locked in your toolbox, in other words, your memory?
Yeah, I mean, I use grade 8s pretty extensively for these cars. I mean, they work pretty good. The other little trick on grade 8s is you need to use fine thread. If you take a look at fine thread and coarse thread, the coarse thread, that all those little, the gaps between the threads, that presents an opportunity to create shear. Where you've got the fine threads, it's all packed together and not so much shear. Grade 5, there's uses for grade 5 where there's not a lot of stress. Grade 8 is pretty much what we do. There are higher grades than that. Back when I was racing, this must be 1970, racing Formula V's, I had a problem with grade 8s, at least the grade 8s I was getting on my steering that would break and I'd lose steering and just find myself in a field. I found something called Umbraco. I don't know if they still make those, but it was like, beyond grade 8 and grade 10, it was like Umbraco, and they work fine. So for the most part, I've had really good luck with grade 8 fine thread. And when some of the metric bolts are a little tougher to get a fine thread on. I don't know what it is, but if we can get fine thread, we can, but most of the time we can't get a fine thread on some of the bigger grade 8 bolts. I mean, in grade 10.5, that's in metric. 8.8 is a little better than grade 5 in US. 10.9 is a little better than grade 8 in US, or in that range. So I mean, I've had really good luck with grade 8. I just don't use grade 5s unless, now we do use grade 5s on things like on the brake ducts, where you're just bolting the brake duct to the spindle. In a grade 5, they're perfectly fine. I mean, you're not putting any load on it other than holding something in place. So that's a spot that we use grade 5. Don't see the need to put the extra expense into grade 8. I know the grade 5 gets the job done. So there are places for grade 5, as long as there's no loads or you're not, holding anything that's moving.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the coolant question. Chris Sauter has a question. Have you guys ever run into corrosion or bacterial growth in the coolant system due to running water?
Have we ever? Corrosion, yes. Bacterium, no. But I know people that have. And I think that comes from not changing your water, flushing it out regularly. As soon as you start to see some things, and also you can get corrosion in aluminum heads and blocks by running pure water. Some of the water wetters, I think, will impede that by the chemicals that are in there. But yeah, it's if you ran pure water like all year round, after a point of time, you would be picking up some corrosion. And I'm not a chemist. You have to have somebody who's a chemical engineer and can tell you what the interactions between the molecules and how they talk to each other. But yeah, I never experienced the bacteria myself. I have experienced corrosion. I know people that have had bacteria, and I think it's just a matter of change it, and don't run absolutely pure water. Have some sort of additive in there that supports the water.
Like water wetter? Like
water wetter. There's a number of different brands out there. Maybe even some that are specifically help for corrosion. You just have to check around. I haven't looked at it lately, so.
Okay, it looks like this is the last question. It's from Cliff Glidden. This is on rear wings. There's a little notch on the back end of the side plates. Why is it there, and what does it do? Does the size of the notch make a difference?
A little notch on the side plates.
Oh, I'm going to interrupt you real quick because Paul Sheldrake said always use distilled or demineralized water.
Oh, that's a good point. I think you use a distilled or demineralized, and you're not going to pick up corrosion or bacteria. Thank you. That's a very good point.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'll read this question again from Cliff. The question, on some rear wings, there's a little notch on the back end of the side plates. Why is this there, and what does it do? Does the size of the notch make a difference?
Well, I gotta say, my mind isn't really picturing this very clearly. But what I can talk to you about side plates and what they do is the purpose of a side plate is to keep the air on the wing. If you didn't have a side plate, the air would tumble off and you get these vortex. Even with side plates, if you watch Formula 1 cars racing in the rain, you can still see those vortex coming off the wing. What's happening is it's actually compressing the air in that vortex, and it's compressing the air, which gets moisture, which gives you a little vortex. The side plates keep the air on the wing. In fact, if you look at modern planes, they got these wingtips now. Same principle. Going through the air without a wingtip, the air kind of tumbles off and creates vortex. With the wingtips, there's no vortex. They actually get better fuel economy like that. So, and then the size of the plate just depends on how aggressive you want to be. Most side plates for most wings are kind of like that by that. I know that on the World Challenge cars, I think later on they're running these super deep side plates. I'd have to, I'm sure they work better, but I really have to see some wind tunnel data to see exactly what they're doing. I'm thinking what they're trying to do is by bringing that all the way down, they're trying to channel all the air in the back of the car, keeping it channeled together so the wing becomes more efficient, rather than just a short side plate that keeps the air under the wing efficient. Wing is curved on the bottom, flat on top, which is opposite of an airplane. Airplane's curved on the top, flat on the bottom, because the curved part is the air flows across that, increased speed, low pressure. So increased speed, low pressure is going to push it down. With an airplane, increased speed, low pressure lifts the wing up. So I'm sure the big deep ones are going to do much better at making the whole channel of air come through. But as far as the notch, I'm not really sure. I mean, I've seen, if you look at the aerodynamics on Formula One cars, I mean, if you really study them, a lot of them use like sawtooth in certain areas. And I've read some things on there, but they don't really tell you why. You know, they sort of talk about it. I'm sure there's some things that they don't want to let out. But I have seen sawtooth on like Formula Ones on aero parts. So, I mean, it could have to do with that, but I'm just not familiar with what you're talking about.
Okay. We just had one comment from Travis Weiser. This is when you were talking about suspension. It says, if anyone wants to know from a user's perspective about Kenny's AGS 4.0 suspension for S197, I'm happy to discuss. It is a game changer. That was nice.
Thank you, Travis. And Wendy also said today she put it on. Yeah. It's a completely different beast, which it is. I mean, when you change geometry, I mean, it's all about, I mean, the only thing between you and the road are your tires. And the only thing that controls your tires is the suspension geometry. So, you know, going around the corner, the more tire you can put on the ground in the front, the better it's going to be, the more grip you're going to get. The more anti-dive you put in, the better braking you're going to get. The more anti-squat in the back, the better braking. Also anti-lift, because anti-squat in the back is anti-lift, and you'll get bring instant center back, the lower roll center. All that geometry stuff plays into, boom, getting the car planted.
Okay, I think we just need to mention the workshop because it's on Monday, 7:30.
I'm getting my cues again. Workshop Monday evening, starting 7:30 Eastern time.
With replays if you can't make it.
With replays if you can't make it. And I didn't mention my shirt. I mentioned my shirt.
I don't think so.
I didn't mention my shirt. Pretty racy, huh? We're actually gone through some stuff and found some old shirts, team shirts. So I thought I've changed it up a little bit, and this is from about 2000 maybe. Mm-hmm. So yeah, pretty snazzy, don't you think? I almost feel like I should have a hot rod. So anyway, we're going to break out some more shirts as we find them, which is kind of interesting. It brings back a lot of nostalgia for me. So if we don't have any more questions,
sign up for the workshop.
Sign up for the workshop, and it's kind of working out because that whole section I had to talk about the StreamYard and simulcasting would have taken about 10 minutes.
So well, lucky for them.
So yeah, we're just actually finishing up 10 minutes early. So listen, glad to see you guys again. I really enjoyed doing this. Be sure in Speed Therapy to send your questions in, because as you know, I talk about what you want to know about. So if you send your questions in, and there's no such thing as a dumb or stupid question. The only stupid question is the question that's not asked, because if you don't know the answer, it's not a dumb question for you. And don't let anybody else influence you on that. If you don't know the answer, it's not a dumb question. You need to know the answer, and I'm more than happy to answer as best I can. I've got a lot of answers, don't have all the answers, but I have a lot of answers. So yeah, send your questions in the Speed Therapy Society.
Mm-hmm, yeah, you have to be a member.
You have to be a member, and you can sign in somewhere. And it's more of this.
We'll put a link.
Thumbs and wrenches going up. Yeah, links, good old links. Links will be coming up. So okay, and if there's nothing else,
see you on Monday.
My gosh, I've got 2 swigs of coffee left. So this really does end up being a little bit early. Wait. Okay, 1 swig of coffee left. So listen, love you guys. Really appreciate you participating, your questions, sharing this with your friends and clubs. And for those that are signed up for the workshop, we'll see you Monday night. Everybody else, we will see you next Saturday morning. And you know, the weather's getting good. Track days are opening up. You guys gotta start feeling good about this. And I hope what I'm telling you is helping you, even without going to the workshop. I hope what I'm trying to teach you guys is already transforming your driving experience. So listen, keep the keep the sunny side up. No, shiny side up. I guess that was between sunny and shiny. Either way, keep the sunny and or shiny side up. And we will see you next Saturday. Thank you.